First meeting. Thank you.
We need Rick. I need papers.
Rick just stepped. He just stepped out.
Well, we'll give him another minute. Okay, returns. That's okay. It is after 4 o'clock. A quorum is present. So the meeting for August 20th of the Nantucket Board of Health is now open. I would first, before we get going, welcome our new health officer.
Thank you.
Roberto Santamaria has joined us. You've been here about a month now, and
It's kind of
you have everything under control, right?
already. Yes.
Already, good. All right, first item is public comment. If anyone wishes to comment on any subject that is not included on the agenda. Hearing none, we will move on to, we have minutes from June 18th, July 9th, and July 16th. Any comments on any of those minutes? Additions, corrections, complaints? They didn't reflect what you said, whatever.
I don't often like to admit it, but I have not read the minutes, but I feel comfortable if the chair has read the minutes. I'm often read them, but this time I haven't.
All right.
So has the chair read them?
The chair has read them.
Thank you. I feel better.
Okay, so, well, hearing no objection, the minutes from June 18th, July 9th, and July 16th are passed by unanimous consent. Item 3, variance request 14 Hawthorne Lane. Roberto.
Yes, sir. So we have the first one on the docket is 14 Hawthorne Lane. We have the variance request here for they're requesting to repair a failed septic system that they have with the standard Title V system. Currently, there is a 4-bedroom home on a 39,774 square foot lot. So it technically does not meet the 1 bedroom for every 10,000 square feet for the nitrogen loading limitations. Also, the property is in the Hummock Pond Watershed Zone B section, so by our regulations, we would require a IA system to be put in. So what the department and I have come to recommend is that we would deny this variance, mainly because the regulations have been set in place. We would have to make sure that this regulation does stay in place and do the work that we are asking to do. The nitrogen load limitations would not be met unless we do have the IA system. It is a common misconception that the deeper the system is, the more nitrogen is removed, and unfortunately that is actually not true. The IA systems do remove more of the nitrogen and meet our standards.
Okay.
Comments? Go ahead.
I'm going to have to recuse myself on this one.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Any comments from the board?
I have a question. Is the existing system that's in the ground now a four-bedroom legal? It's a legal four-bedroom system that's in the ground now?
Would you like to come up and introduce yourself? And
This is Bill Gorhan, the owner, and I'm Mike Conley, the surveyor.
I'm the trustee of the trust.
okay.
And yes, it's a leach pit tank and D-box, and it's inspected and failed through the hydraulic failure. So what we did is I did a plan and submitted it to the board, and it was denied just because of what you're still saying. And so we decided to just ask for special variance that we have a right to do, and so that's what we did. We stand by the letter. We feel that the groundwater separation is 26 feet to the bottom of the trench, new trench that would be put in. Soil is good sand up there. The elevation is elevation 40. The bed would be at elevation 35, the bottom of the bed. It does not meet the one bedroom per 10,000. We do know that. So, it's not. It's just 226 square feet less than 40,000. So I do understand.
So is the new system that you were designing for a three-bedroom?
No, this is for the four-bedroom.
Because the
just to repair in kind is what we wanted, but with the new Zone B on the pond watershed, we would need to put in the alternative system to get the fourth bedroom, to retain the fourth bedroom.
So my question is, if you put in an existing system, a Title V system, new system, you can only put in a three-bedroom. Is that right?
If when we get denied here, we'll go for a three-bedroom.
Other comments?
Does the house, I mean, there is a house on the lot now,
Yes.
and how many bedrooms do you have now?
It has 4 bedrooms.
So you're going to convert one to a study?
Right.
Bill, I'm just, I
Right,
get
no,
that,
but
you know.
Yeah, it's 1,800 square feet. It's a modest home. It's not winterized.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it was built in '78. So it's pretty simple.
Art, you have a comment?
I would just caution on removing a bedroom that it meets our standard of definition for applying a bedroom in the room count. That's just a suggestion to the applicant to make sure it meets the definition, because it may not be just as simple as putting study on a plan and calling it a day.
Yeah, I guess the difficulty here is, sort of is this the first one? I'm trying to remember if we've had another Zone B request like this previously.
I believe this is the first one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, just to be clear.
I would agree. I believe this is the first one.
Yeah.
I think it is, because this has only been in effect for 2010. We did this. Seems shorter than that, but I don't remember Zone B request.
Physically, the system, if you do a Title V system, and you want 4 bedrooms where it's only, what are you going to do? Make the system larger?
No, we would need to put the IA alternative system component in with the Title V system to allow to get the fourth bedroom through the one bedroom, or reduce leaching, or put down the groundwater.
No, Mike, I'm a little confused, because if we say you have to put in an IA system, you'll put in a legal 4-bedroom IA system, right?
That's right.
If you want to keep the Title V system that you're putting in, how do you make it a 4-bedroom?
You need to put in an alternative system component in with the Title V system. You would need a septic tag or FAST or one of the things to clean it, to get the fourth bedroom. It's a seasonal house. It's been seasonal since 1978, and I think it's just, for 4 months of use, that the alternative system is just not.
But then what happens if the property's sold?
Well, it would be for 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, unless a new owner wanted to put in
the
an IA
alternative
system.
Right.
I mean, and I assume this is sort of I hate to say it, but I assume this is a cost issue for a dwelling that's seasonal and so forth. I mean, my difficulty, and just to share with the board, is that, we're starting to set a precedent in a way, and I think if we're going to be clear on what we expect to happen each time this occurs,
You get more coming down the road.
it's hard to provide a waiver at this point. And that's the difficulty that we face. And
Yeah.
they understand that, and that's just the way it is.
That's my difficulty, too. We had new regulations for Zone B. We're later going to talk about another alternative design for a certain area. Hamid Pond, if you look at the last 1 or 2 water quality reports, it's not doing that well. Harbor's actually doing a little better, but the ponds still need work. Any other comments, and we'll proceed with a vote. So,
It just seems sort of too bad we don't have 200 feet, otherwise you might not be in here.
Make a comment.
But it's
I-
just,
yeah, go ahead.
I've
It's just
been
the way
on
it
a couple
is,
of boards, and I know what you're going through, and I've been on the ZBA, and so you want to have precedents, and you either got to decide if 99% is okay or it isn't okay. And in conjunction with the distance between the water table and the system, are those things that you can rule on every case, not just our case. So those were my thoughts as I came in, thinking about how I would be if I was sitting in your seat. Those are our thoughts. So
well, thank
we will go with your ruling
Fine.
and go from there. We don't intend to build any big house with 4 use, more use or any of that. So we'll establish how we apply after we get your vote.
I appreciate your comments. So I need a motion to approve the variance or a motion not to approve the variance. However the motion is made, we'll vote accordingly and make the decision.
well, I'd be happy to make the motion that we accept the recommendation of the staff and deny the variance request.
Do I hear a second? Any further discussions? We are voting on following the recommendations of the health staff and denying the variance as requested. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. It's carried unanimously with one gentleman who did not vote. Thank you. Next is not a dissimilar topic. We're dealing with, if you recall, 2 months ago we had a hearing on Regulation 64. We did not close that hearing. I think there was a sense in the board we wanted a little more information. We had a consultant speak to us about some of the details of IA systems. So, is there anyone here that's going to speak for or against this proposal? This one, okay. We're talking about, Regulation 64.
You can have discussion regarding it, or you just want to?
No, we're going to open the hearing, a public hearing again.
Okay.
So I just want to get a sense of who's going to be speaking. Okay, so small numbers. All right, you want to summarize this, Roberto or Art, for us? Then we'll open the hearing.
Would you mind? Thank you.
Art Crowley, Assistant Health Director. So, quick overview of the additions, revisions to Regulation 64. It affects Nantucket Harbor watershed. It would require all septic systems to be inspected every 5 years. It would also require an upgrade to an innovative alternative septic system, whether it was a property transfer, whether it was new construction, repair, addition, anything like that would require a new alternative septic system on it. There are two needs areas designated in there, which is Shimo and Monomoy. So that area, the ACO, the administrative consent order, would be available to those people in there because that needs area is for sewering. So when sewer does come in, they'll have to hook up, but in order to, say, not repair, get a full repair on the septic system, they would enter into the ACO with us, and when the septic was available, they would be put in. So, and any current failures would be mandated within a 6-month, 12-month period. I think some of them are technical, definitely the hydraulics, and so they'll be mandated for an immediate, pretty much an immediate repair within the year. So that's pretty much a quick overview of the regulation. As far as why this is necessary, it's necessary on many accounts. You know, our mission here is to minimize nitrogen from Nantucket Harbor watershed. And the only way we can minimize that is to control it. The town's in an effort to control it on many levels, being whether it's sewering, whether it's proposing these regulations, the fertilizer regulations, and also the catch basins and stormwater runoff, sort of revamping of those. So the town's hitting this from several different directions. Our goal is harbor health, and the only way we're going to achieve harbor health is to control nitrogen. So it calls for, you know, the comprehensive waste management program calls for it. That area outside, you know, we always say Gardner Road, but I think if I'm looking at the map correctly, it looks like really Shakamo Road, because that's the other ACO area. So from there out, you look, your densities are smaller. I mean, your densities are less. Lots are bigger. To run sewer up there is definitely more expensive and not quite as attractive expense-wise. Anyway, so putting IAs out there are certainly, you know, our method of controlling nitrogen in that area. And if you read the estuaries report, a lot of that problem existing right now is low, and even though it's improved in Focus Harbor, it's improved, but it's still degraded. And this area in which the IAs would be approved is concentrated on that area that we're talking about. So.
Okay, thank you. If I didn't mention, the hearing is open. Okay, any comments from the audience? This is a public hearing. We'll let them speak. We can talk.
Okay.
We have plenty of time to talk. I just want to hear the public first.
So, Paul Fantos, Nantucket Surveyors. So, we're talking the entire harbor watershed protection area, both Zone A and Zone B, correct?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes, I believe
The
so.
entire harbor watershed, Zone A and Zone B. Now, not all of that area is part of the sewer needs area, but there are subsections that are the sewer needs area, which would be similar to what we're doing in Mattock with the ACO.
Correct.
And this is strictly for failed systems.
I don't believe so. It's not necessarily for failed system, but all the systems that are to be triggered, the new regulations, repairs.
No, what I'm talking about is a transfer that has a passing system. This does not apply.
I don't believe so.
No.
So it's new construction
Mhm.
and failed systems.
That's simple.
Yes.
All right. The other question would be then, is there any consideration given to whether a system?
Can we stop there for a minute?
Yeah,
I thought on transfer, they were to be upgraded.
I agree.
I agree.
And
That's
was it
what
on
I
transfers?
How I
Okay.
understood
So
it.
just to be
Sorry.
clear,
Ooh,
I'm sorry. That was my mistake.
okay?
my mistake.
Okay. So just to be clear, Paul,
So you could
The
have
intention
a compliant
is-
system,
that's correct.
in that because that property is being sold, that system would have to be upgraded to an IA system.
Right. That's what it says.
Well, that goes back to my other question. My other question was whether there was any consideration, which becomes moot then, on technical failures as opposed to hydraulic failures.
I think the answer is no. There's a difference in the time frame for the requirement to have the system upgraded, but technical or hydraulic will be required to be
Right.
upgraded.
The difference
Failure
is
is a
time.
Well, I guess maybe I would like maybe some discussion of what's on the property transfer of the compliant passing system. I think that's really where you're going to see the biggest concern.
Right. Where is that? Because I don't remember that on the trend. If you have a system that passes.
Well, let us make sure we,
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was in here.
well, let's not have an understanding. Let's find out what it is.
I think that's
You're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I
with
think
that.
that's a
Right.
dramatic change. I mean, I can understand where you're going with the other one, because that's a system, those are systems that are already have to be repaired under the code.
Right.
Whether you have the IA or not. Now you're taking a large group of people with functioning systems that you're now saying $25,000 upgrade, to that system.
Be more than that.
Art, you have an,
In F2, F2 under 6404.
It's in there.
It is clear.
Look, whether we anticipated this or not, I think it's been here all along, Paul. I'm not saying everybody read it word for word. I understand that. But it's not that this has been slipped in since last week or something.
no, it's been there.
It's been there all along. And I think the intent here was that we're looking for trigger mechanisms to help turn over Title V's to IA systems. And in addition to the failure criteria, I think when this was drafted, the idea was on a transfer. That's another situation where things can be triggered. And that's just the way it was designed. I mean, on purpose, if you will. So.
Okay. Would you come forward, identify yourself, and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for my colleague. I spoke at the last one, and I do appreciate you guys having George Left, please felt like you never at the last meeting, because he was really helpful in describing the benefit of the buying an IA system. Which I think that was the critical component piece, was that we had fully functioning Title V systems that were the problem. They're the problem in terms of the nutrient overloading in the harbor, particularly both the Central and the harbor area. So it was just my understanding all along that that was the critical component. When I was speaking with Richard, we were also, but when I was speaking with Richard, he was even conceiving of having a sunset date, but that, in terms of everybody, well, after 15 years, even if you haven't transferred your property or done any construction, then you would have to do an IA system. That was taken out of the equation. I'd love to still see that back in, but for the time being, I think you guys are going in the right way. So that's fairly critical. That was the whole point about updating.
okay, thank you.
One other question.
Go ahead.
That I be able to answer too is, was there any, and I haven't seen the studies and so forth, but I mean, was there any difference between the zone A and the zone B, or you guys have strongly feel the zone B is just as critical as the zone A as far as how the watershed goes?
Well,
You know what I'm saying, with regards to?
yeah.
Regards to what, nitrogen levels, or?
Yeah, like when Hummock Pond, when we did the, when you did the ground, the bedroom, the groundwater flow restriction for even properties that tied to town water and the Hummock Pond watershed, you limited that to the zone A as opposed to the zone B.
Yes.
So there was some discussion between the priority of the zone A and the zone B, and whether or not, in this situation, the whether that zone A is more critical initially than the zone B. And I'm just trying to picture in my head what the zone A and zone B looks like in that area, whether or not.
I think it's critical.
I understand.
It's Collier, it's kind of hard to tell where that nitrogen
Yeah. And I don't know
element
if
comes
zone A
from.
and zone B is strong originally, whether it was,
Yeah.
how.
I mean, I think we have to recognize, it's a pretty, when you add them together, it's a big area. And a lot of people over time are going to be impacted. In terms of the transfers, I haven't done a study in how many actual transfers there are per year within the area, but,
There's quite a few.
Quite a few, but we're not talking 200 a year or something like that. We're talking about a much lower number. And it does have a financial impact. I recognize that. And
How much of the area is actually going to be in the ACOR?
could I comment on that, Paul, before you answer? Because I want to go back to that. My understanding of the ACO option was that we set this up so that it required a waiver of the board for that to be triggered. In other words, the requirement is that the systems will be upgraded wherever they are, and it's within the board's authority to grant a waiver. Presumably, we would consider a waiver in those areas where they're subject to sewering and the ACO is available. But I think we recognized in our discussions that, for example, there's a significant difference in the expected timing between Monomoy and Schimmel as they're described. So that, this is my recollection of our discussion and why this was important, is that if we don't expect sewer to go to Schimmel for, I'll make up a period, 10 or 15 years, we might not consider waiving the requirement to make the changes to IA systems in that area. And in order to do that on a broad brush, it was easier to include all areas within the regulation, but retain our waiver authority to accommodate certain situations. Is that the way it's written?
I believe it is.
Okay.
If I'm understanding you correctly, and I think that, because every ACO comes in front of this
Right.
board for approval.
I was going to say,
So
it's,
there's
If
your-
that's the way it is, but I just want to be clear that it's not an automatic,
No.
okay.
no, an AACO has to come here. We've done that. So that would be,
I think it's also important the way we describe it, though. I just want to be clear that often the description of the process here implies, sort of subtly, that the ACOs will be automatic in any needs areas impacted by the regulation. And all I want to say is that this may not be so if we don't expect sewer realistically to go into one of the needs areas for a long period of time. At least that's sort of my
I
the way I've
agree.
been looking at
I
it.
agree, and it should be very clear, and the minutes should be very clear that
Right.
an ACO is not a guarantee. It should not be assumed.
Paul, can you tell these guys about that provision that you sent us in Title V? Just in case somebody's in this zone says, I'm going to put the IA in, and then town sewer comes. And it was specifically in Title V, if you put an IA in.
Yeah, there is a provision for mandatory hookup to town to sewer if it's available to your property.
Right.
But under Title V, they realize that if somebody has gone to the expense of putting an IA system in, that they don't necessarily have to connect to sewer because they're treating their effluent
Right.
in a manner that would be equivalent to connecting to the town
Just
sewer. So there are some cases where
Right.
if an IA system's in the ground and the sewer comes by, I don't mandatorily have to tie in under Title V.
Well, to follow up, I think there are a couple things here, Paul. One, from the board's perspective and even the sewer advisory committee's perspective, we haven't yet dealt with a specific way to handle the financial impact of sewer, taking the sewer by a lot that has an IA system that was just installed yesterday. And, just, I'm talking personally now, I think we ought to find a way that financially there's some mitigation there. And that may help address your concern because, it isn't always money, but that's often part of the issue. hooking up, it seems to me, if we're talking about IA systems reducing the nitrogen, 50%, or that's the number we've heard, at least I've heard. If you hook up to the sewer, you're going to 100%. So if we mitigate the financial impact, I suspect we may still want to hook them up to the sewer. If that makes, do you understand where I'm trying to go? Okay.
All right. Any other comments?
My comment is, I think a lot of this hinges on just, does anybody have any idea when the sewering will start anywhere? I think that's a big problem.
Well,
I mean, if we knew that we would have financing and Monomoy would start in 2 years, that would solve a lot of questions that people have. But we have no idea, do we?
well, I mean, I think we have a little more than no, but I must say that, let's put it this way, the Board of Selectmen has talked about bringing forward an article at the town meeting covering both Monomoy and the so-called plus lots, which are other lots in the existing sewer district or close, contiguous to it, as well as Nantucket and Shimo. Now, I'm not sure we're all 100% on board with that, but that's been the discussion. Earlier on, I think the board, the recommendation of the consultant was the priority, if you had to select one, was to go with the Nantucket Shimo. I think our board felt that the Nantucket Harbor was a higher priority, and if we were to select one area, as opposed to the 2 or 3 I just mentioned, I think the board's inclination, and this is my reading of the board, we haven't voted, so to speak, would be to go with the Monomoy and the other so-called plus lots or whatever you call them. So I expect that an article will go to town meeting in April of 2016 to at least cover the Monomoy area, Jim. Now, there's never a promise or a guarantee, and you got to get it passed and all those caveats, but that's where I think we're headed. Okay?
I think DPW's consultant, Wood and Curran, presently has a contract on the needs area, which includes what Rick was talking about. So they're starting their design work, a review of those particular areas.
Right. And a lot of this has to do with getting zero rate financing, and there's some timing issues, and if we go with both, it's possible we'd end up recommending starting to actually spend the money on one. Hopefully we can keep the approval for the other for the zero rate, but it might start 2 years later, sort of to ease the financing and really almost the management burden to the town. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in these, but that's, okay, I'm just giving you my personal perspective.
Okay. I only have one more question. When we originally were discussing this, we discussed everything from Gardner Road out. Now, I heard you say it's not necessarily Gardner Road, it could be Shakama. What happens in between Shakama and Gardner Road?
That's considered the Shimo needs area. That's the area Rick was just talking about where they're not sure what they want to do there. They are sure with Monomoy. That's why the ACO would be an option.
Right. And there's a specific map, people get confused and can get agitated, unfortunately, about, if their house is in what they think is Shimo, but they're actually in a map with, there is a map. So every single lot can be identified, whether they're in the so-called Monomoy area or in the so-called Shimo area.
Okay.
Roberto.
Yes, and it was also brought up to my attention that in Title V, when you do install an IA system, there is a credit for extra added gallons per day. So, for example, a septic tank system has been allowed in Title V to do 165 gallons per day, approximately 660 gallons per day per acre. Our regulations right now have it restricted at 440 gallons per day. So it was just, we are allowed to make, as the local permitting authority, we are allowed to permit something stricter than the state, but it was brought up to my attention to suggest it to the board to see if they would be willing to entertain that information.
You mean with an IA system to allow more bedrooms in effect than the current structure is?
Technically, yes.
Okay, just so I understand.
Real quick, with basically the nitrogen loading limitations allow when you install an IA, they allow you to put in, so like on 20,000 square feet, you can get a third bedroom. On 30,000, you can get a fourth. On 660, you can get, on 40,000, you can get 660, which is a practice that's been going on in permits that have been approved, and the guidance from the approval letters from DEP for these this alternate design septic systems. That is one of the provisions that is allowed. So I don't know what we're asking. Do we want to amend these?
I guess that's my question. Are you making a suggestion of an amendment?
Yes, if
Can
the
you
board
say that in one word instead of his 5-minute dissertation?
if the board would like to recommend a 660 gallons per day for a 40,000 square foot lot, for a 1 acre lot, that's what DEP does allow. However, we are allowed to keep it at 440 if we would like, as the permitting authority.
When we did some of those people that come in from Fisher's Landing, we had 3 of those things that we allowed 1 bedroom more
Yes.
Right.
than an IA system. So we made provision. We gave them a variance for that.
That is exactly the same thing. Only in this case, it would be written into the regulation.
You mean, so it wouldn't require a variance in the future?
It wouldn't require a
Automatic?
variance.
So the amendment would be to extend the capacity to 660.
Yes.
Well, do you think that's a good idea? Where we're talking
I don't
about-
know.
We're talking about things going the other way, tightening things up,
We-
and now you're losing.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a couple months to read through all the water quality data to understand what 0.355 milligrams per liter meant, so I'm a little slow. Go ahead.
So real quick,
Well, take your time. This is important.
so 19 milligrams per liter is what is being removed. I mean, is the standard that's being met of the effluent coming out. So the nitrogen is being reduced by roughly 50%. So the bedroom, as I understand it, they've given a credit for a couple more bedrooms. You can't go, crazy with it, but the effluent reduction is still the same.
I got you.
Just to wrap my head around that, because I thought this is always a little, whether it's really bathrooms or bedrooms or what really impacts the flow. But if we had I like to use it simple terms, if we had 100 gallons going through it based on 4 bedrooms, and we reduce it 50%, that's fine. But if we then increase the flow from 100 gallons to 150 gallons, the total nitrogen isn't reduced as much. Okay? So I just want to be clear that that's the side impact of what we're talking about. As a practical matter, I've never been convinced that the bedroom count ended up with those flows happening. But I look for someone who knows more about it than I do, because I think understanding that it's important before we move forward with making this a non-waiver issue and making it automatic. Because, I know when you get out in these areas where the houses might be very happy to have 6 bedrooms, all of them, right, automatically on an acre. So that's what would happen. Is it likely then that the flows are going to increase or not? And if they do, you're negating what you just tried to accomplish.
And are you limiting to well? Or what if you get the Shimo Pond? Oh, they have town water up in there.
I haven't had time to reflect on them.
Maybe we're
proposed
better
amendment.
not to deal with that one
So
right now. We've got enough on our plate.
Is
We
there
can- We can
anybody-
take this up and have another public hearing. If we ever-
Yeah, as we move forward, to discuss this and vote on it, is there anyone on the board that envisions proposing such an amendment? Then we won't even,
Okay.
there's no reason to discuss it, and if we can at a later time. Okay. Are there other comments from the public? Well, hearing none, and if I hear no objections from the board, we will close the public hearing And we will open it now to discussion from the board. Comments, feelings, pleasures.
Well, I think we've gone through a long process and had lots of input, and I haven't had, other than the question that Paul raised, for example, about transfers, which is a good question.
Yes.
But I haven't heard any substantive reason not to proceed. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time looking at numbers. 'Cause I'm a numbers kind of guy, and I could not find anything in the data of nitrogen loading or nitrogen per milliliters or whatever to convince me that this was not a good idea. And however you look at the numbers, you could take historical data, and the average content is like 0.4 with a standard deviation that could range from 0.2 to almost 8, which means there's a lot of variability. What really impressed me is if you look at the nitrogen content out of the harbor and more into the bay, it's really significant, really significant. And I almost started debating with myself about the significance of 3 digits, and I said, you know what, Malcolm, this is a sample, this is an idea, but clearly if you compare the harbor to the bay, it's almost twice as much nitrogen, however you look at it. So I'm quite happy with proceeding with this. So I need a motion to accept or reject the amendments to, or the revisions to Regulation 64.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All are in favor of proposing the new Regulation 64. Please say aye.
Can I just ask one question
What?
before we vote? Is there a date of implementation? Is it like, is there something in here that's effective in 60 days or tomorrow? Or
Good question. You always ask that
I
question.
just wanna-
That's your
Someone
job.
else asked me.
It's not in here, no. There's no direct, it is not expressly
Well,
We
written
may
out.
want to put something in the motion then. so
It
that
can't be
we're clear.
tomorrow. This is, what is this? This is August.
September 1st.
And that work with the staff, we want to make sure we have an operationally effective.
So why don't we
way to do
say
it.
October 1st? You comfortable with October 1st? That gives
I would be
you guys a chance to get up to speed? September 1st?
I would prefer something sooner rather than later so that we don't get an onslaught.
Okay.
Okay, that-
Well, I would propose that we put the date for September 1st. So the motion is still on the table. The one addition is that the new Regulation 64 will take effect on September 1st of this year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposed, this is approved. And I thank everyone. I thank Collier, and I thank the staff and the everyone in the town that's worked for this. It's taken a while, but I think we've made the right decision based upon the information that we have. All right.
Waste holders.
The next is kind of a lingering topic, and we wanted to get up to date. A couple meetings we've discussed the waste hauler regulations that we approved a couple years ago, and there's been some question of whether we need them, whether we can enforce them, whether they should be revised. So, Roberto?
So I'll turn it over to her in just a moment, but as of right now, the way I understand it is the way we have it set to license the waste haulers is it's based on a certain amount of tonnage that enters the waste hauling facility.
I
So-
thought, but it wasn't.
Okay, so would you mind taking over? Okay.
So, basically, we decided that people would be licensed as a waste hauler based on last year's, how much, if they went to over the scales 10 times, at Waste Options, that's what determined them getting a license for this year, which is very difficult to enforce and monitor. So with that, you know, a lot of landscapers and builders and stuff are being affected by it. They're not in the business of actually hauling, you know, refuse. They're in the business of building. It's just a secondary. It's a, you know, that is happens because of their business. They're not in the business to actually haul refuse. So we bring it to you to look for a little guidance. We can certainly easily handle the refuse haulers who are in it for business. If, you know, anyway, looking for your guidance.
Do you have any guidance for us?
I would like, yes I do, I'm sorry. My guidance would be that we could easily handle the trash haulers who are licensed to do it, because, you know, we're looking for storage on their property, we're looking for site assignments. They're the people in the business, not to say others can't be, but we would follow up on complaints on those. So I think it would be more effective for all and the department to handle people who are in the business exclusively of hauling C&D and refuse and garbage.
And after speaking with town administration, she agrees that the people who we really want to pay attention to right now are the people who are licensed to haul, you know, C&D, the actual refuse haulers. Everyone, by the way it is set right now, anyone who goes over those 10 times, landscapers, you know, any sort of construction worker, they'll end up getting licensed at the same time, and that's really not the people we're trying to target at this moment.
Comments?
It's good for me.
I never heard the board so quiet. They must all agree. So we need to revise those regulations. So we'll need a public hearing to revise those regulations.
We will.
So we have to, the board has to vote on having a public hearing. So I would propose that we have a public hearing in September. And you present some revised regulations. Does the board all agree in September? So by unanimous consent, we'll have a public hearing on the subject in September.
Okay, so this is Regulation 76. Just
76. In other words, revised, which should be quite short regulations. All you need is a pen. All right, we have condemnations.
Okay, so the history behind these is that there have been some emergency condemnations based on erosion, based on circumstances at the properties. These emergency condemnations were done, however, they had never been ratified by the board. So what I'm doing is we put this on the agenda so that we can ratify the condemnations. The information is in the packet. 23 and 5 Sheep Pond Road were both based on erosion condemnations. They were done as emergency. And then the 11 North Liberty Street condemnation was based on having no heat, electricity, or water.
Didn't we do 11 North?
I didn't see it on the agenda or the minutes, but if it was done...
Informed.
So what we're looking for is an actual vote to ratify these 3 condemnations so the town council can move forward with the order letters, the enforcement actions.
And the erosions, where are these located?
5 and 23 Sheep Pond Road.
Any comments on the board? Do we have maps or anything? I'm just trying to think. Sheep Pond.
I think Sheep Pond is pretty clear for those who have seen them. Their pictures out in the
Yeah, okay.
ether, and it's...
I got it.
So
All right. Any comments on the board?
I'm comfortable with ratifying the decisions you've made.
Then I need a motion to approve the condemnations of 23 and 5 Sheep Pond Road and 11 North Liberty Street. Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of officially condemning 23 and 5 Sheep Pond Road and 11 North Liberty Street, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Condemnations are approved unanimously. Now, yes, this I requested because we got confused last time about the authority and what happens when we demolish structures and so forth. So Roberto said you would give us a lecture on this.
So,
Educate us.
no, it's not necessarily a lecture. So the housing code that we follow is 105 CMR 410. It is a regulation set forth by the Department of Public Health under the Massachusetts General Law of 111. What it does, it gives the Board of Health and its ensuing health department as its enforcement arm the unilateral action to be able to enforce the housing code on a local level. As part of that, there is a provision within the housing code that allows for a immediate or hearing of condemnation. There are the 3 different levels of condemnation where we have the orders to vacate and secure, which is, for the examples that I was saying was to town administration, is a room, for example. A single room has a lot of issues where a roof is caving in or there's significant bacterial growth or mold growth. You can order to vacate and secure that one room so that the rest of the house is still habitable. You can also order specific sections of any dwelling to be unfit for human habitation. These are sections of the bedrooms. You can set an entire wing of a house unfit for habitation, mainly because of structural issues or any violations of the section 750 of the housing code, section 750. And then there's also the ability to condemn when there is these issues that are set that can harm of the public or the occupant, in which case we can condemn an entire property, where that whole property is to be roped off or secured completely, and no one is to be allowed. In that part, let me find the specific regulation on here. And for some reason, here it is. Yes. The specific section is 410.950, which gives the officer, the agent to the Board of Health, the right to do a condemnation, a placarding of the property, and we can also order the vacate, where we can where in a situation where it is too dangerous for the property to be occupied, we can have a police officer or ourselves forcibly remove the occupant in that situation. There are 2 different types of condemnation. We can do the emergency condemnations, which you saw on 23 and 5 and North Liberty, where the agent sees that the issue is too dangerous to wait for a hearing. You can do the emergency condemnation. Then within 7 days, the occupant is allowed to request a hearing to say why or why not this property should not be condemned. And then we would ratify it at the subsequent meeting. And then there is the general overlay of condemnation, where we are seeing the erosion happening, for example, and it's going through. We can hold a public hearing where the owner of the property and the occupant is allowed to come in, plead their case, and then the Board of Health would have to take a formal vote as to whether or not to condemn the property. Once a property is condemned under Mass General laws, we are allowed to within 90 days, petition for the demolition of that structure if the structure is deemed a hazard to the public. And then also the other section is if a property is condemned for a year, you can petition the Superior Court to have it condemned or to have it demolished or to have a receiver appointed to bring it back up to code. So those are the 2 condemnation authorities that we have. There's a little known section in the housing code where it is the correction of violations by the board and its expenses, where it is section 960 of 105 CMR 410, where the Board of Health is allowed to authorize, based on uncorrected violations, authorize the expenditure of funds to bring a property back up to code, and then seek restitution. So we can either put a lien on the property or do a civil suit to recover the costs of bringing a property back up to code. That is very rarely used in my experience. More than anything, you would like to go through town council first and do the courts first before this section of the code is enforced. I'd be happy to have any questions.
Going back to demolition.
Yes.
We talked about this for one of those houses.
Mm-hmm.
You can order the demolition. Where is the financial responsibility? Who has the financial responsibility then?
So when it comes down to this situation, if we were to condemn it and then we do the demolition, we would have to put the upfront cost as the town and then seek the recovery of those funds, whether it be through a lien or through civil litigation.
So the Board of Health would go to the selectmen?
It'd
For
be
funds?
Yes. The Board of Health would have to request those funds from the Board of Selectmen unless there is a current line item within the town, within the department to do it. We would have to request those emergency funds from the selectmen.
Okay, other questions? And so if, all right, it's a town's expense, and does the town then own the property or the?
If in that situation where we would have to demolish and we were to put a lien on the property, through the lien laws, after a certain amount of time, you can take the property through tax title. However, usually when you're just putting the lien on the property, those costs are recovered through the taxes. You put the lien on the property and then it's assessed with the taxes every year. If those aren't paid, if the lien is not paid, then after a certain amount of time, you can take the town can take the property through tax title.
Well, what happens if you have a case where the ocean is taking the house, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the Board of Selectmen and the town put up the funds to demolish what's left to keep the public safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden the house is gone, the land's mostly gone, and the owner's going to simply walk away, then the town's left with.
The town can still sue to recover the funds from the owner of the property.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, guidelines for technology testing for variances. The staff requested this, and because not just have rules, but guidelines as you go through decision making.
Yes.
So we have these variances come by, and we need a standard way of approaching them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's specifically to variances, but
To-
some direction that we've, on paths we've taken in the past, we weren't very consistent. So, and I don't know that we need to vote or anything like that, because there's a little bit to take in and think about with these things. But this would be the start of, setting us on a path, so we're not bringing things to you unnecessarily and having people contest things, so that we all know we're all on the same page. So the biggest one right now is Title V. Title V says that any lot with an on-site well and septic is nitrogen sensitive and needs to meet the nitrogen loading limitations. So that would be Tom Nevers, that would be Cisco out of the Hummock Pond watershed. It would be Surfside area out here. Those would be all areas that is considered nitrogen sensitive by Title V. And on repairs, we're talking about repairs right now. They need to meet the loading limitation, the nitrogen loading limitation. So in the past, the office sometimes required an IA on those properties and sometimes didn't. Okay, so I'm looking for a little direction there, as well as, I would propose in our harbor watersheds, that'd be Nantucket, Nantucket, Hummock Pond, and our wellhead, that on a repair, if they don't meet 1 bedroom for every 10,000 square feet of property, then an innovative alternative system needs to go in. On these outlying areas, my preference would be, because they're nitrogen sensitive and DEP stands by it, they should have to as well. But DEP provides guidance that in those areas you could allow a standard system. So we could develop some criteria, no variance, on some of these repairs. They would say something along, give you an example, if you had to request a variance, then you don't meet the criteria and you'd have to install an innovative alternative. If you have to mound your system, if you're within 300 feet down gradient of an existing neighboring well, stuff like that could be part of the criteria that we would develop. But the areas of which we're struggling with are outside our harbor ponds and wellhead watersheds. It's the Surfside, Tom Nevers, Maya Common, all these areas are close to the ocean. The groundwater is going that way, so there's an argument there. But still, it's nitrogen sensitive. They're on 20,000 square foot lots with 4 bedrooms, and there's a nitrogen loading issue. We're one island, we're one aquifer, so that's the point I'm making, and that's the direction where I would like us to kind of work on, so that we're consistent going forward.
See, there are some questions about that. If you take the alphabet streets in Tom Nevers, 80 to 90% of those houses out there are sitting on 5,000 or 7,000 square foot lots. They have 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. If their system fails, they don't even meet 10,000 square foot to have 1 bedroom.
So, and one other thing to consider in this discussion is, with sewering and as time goes on, Surfside, it potentially could be sewered. Cisco area outside the Hunter Watershed potentially could be sewered because some of those plans are bringing it there. Tom Nevers, probably not. So, in developing some of this guidance, some of that has to be brought into consideration, potential sewering of areas, and again, IAs being required. So that's just some food for thought.
Questions? Art?
Well, I think the main thing direction that we should be heading now is all the harbor, all the stuff that's affected by the harbor and Nantucket and places like that that are really in dangerous things, dangerous positions. And you take those alphabet streets out in Tom Nevers, I don't think that's an extremely big deal right now. On one side of the street, all the lots are basically 2.75 or 3 acres. It's the other side of the street where all those houses are packed in those tiny, tiny lots.
Well, how about if you get, those little lots on Arlington, Berkeley,
Right.
Mycom, some lots, maybe a criteria would be to, because most of the leach pits and everything, the stuff right in the well radiuses is, they're 40-something feet above groundwater. You test the neighbor's wells before you issue a repair, and if there's no problem within, I don't see what the big deal would be with fixing it conventionally.
And again, just looking for some which way we want to go. I don't know if, we need to just keep doing it like this, or develop a subcommittee or something like that. I know that gets into other areas.
You mean to write something? Write some guidelines?
Policy, guides, or we can do it and just bring it in front of you like this and continue this way.
It'd be easier for me if I saw something written out, potential guidelines. It doesn't mean, and they are guidelines, they're not regulations.
No,
Yeah.
because the Title V already allows you
Yeah.
to do either or.
So just to be clear, it sounds like these are pre-existing, so to speak, conditions.
Yeah.
So if someone was building a new house under those circumstances,
It's
they'd be
different.
subject to whatever.
Yes.
So if we think it helps me a little bit to isolate the issue to those situations. where there's pre-existing, and we're talking then again about financial hardship and all this kind of stuff, to go one way or another where it may not be absolutely necessary because you're not on the harbor or and this kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I think those areas could be not as critical as the stuff that we're facing now with the harbors and Nantucket and the things that we're passing right now.
It's always been so interesting to me, just in general, on the aquifer issue, that, on the one hand, you've got the water company who, every time they say anything, I'm exaggerating, but not much, our water's perfect. I've never heard Mr. Gardner suggest anything other than that. Now, we want to keep it that way. And what's the risk of these, what are there, 600 of these incidents or something impacting the aquifer? Is that sort of what we're trying to grapple with, really? I'm just trying to say, what are the criteria here?
Well, if you're, and I believe it says it in 64, if you flip to 6404, if you're in the harbor watershed, if you're in Humboldt Pond, if you're in Nantucket, if you're in the wellhead, even on repairs, I believe it says you're nitrogen sensitive.
Right.
You need to meet the one for every 10,000. I'm talking about outside of that.
That's what I mean. We're outside of that, so we're in areas, Tom Nevers or whatever,
Yeah,
we're in areas that we don't think are close enough to be in those watersheds, so that they're draining, the water flows someplace else. It's got a long way to go down, or it's not always a long way in Surfside. Anyway, before it hits the aquifer. But what are we trying to get at? We want to make sure the aquifer is protected, and is that as much a nitrogen issue as what are the concerns that you might raise to help us understand what the...
Well, I mean, is there a question like where I live? It's 57 feet to water.
And groundwater goes to the ocean.
Right.
So in those areas, they consider nitrogen sensitive, but I think the concern would be to drinking water wells.
So Steve's idea of testing might help clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, especially the small. I mean, if you worry, it's not where you on the other side. You got it's 3 acres, 3.5 acre zoning.
2.7. Most of the lots are almost 3 acres on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
It's the other side where they're 5,000 and 7,000 square foot lots with 3 and 4 bedroom houses on them now.
So I think what I'm
sorry,
hearing is
board
we'll
members,
develop
I had-
criteria.
What's this?
So I think what I'm hearing is maybe we should develop.
Yeah, because we're starting to talk about at least 3 or 4 different things here. And if you're comfortable every time you have an issue or something coming to us and discussing it, but I guess you want some consistency and guidelines.
Yeah, just an overarching guideline.
So it'd be a lot easier for me to discuss that if I could see something.
We'll put something
Because a
together.
guideline is not a guideline if we have to talk about it all the time.
Correct.
All right, let me ask you a question. Like, just take for instance we were talking about in those alphabet streets in Tom Nevers. How many failures? Are there a lot of failures out there?
Over the years, I
A
haven't seen a
couple
lot.
every year.
But compared to, like, say, Nantucket and other places,
Right.
Yeah.
Steve, I would defer to you, because we don't witness some of those.
Yeah, there's probably a couple every year. That
Yeah.
have some issues. We had some recently. Did new test holes there.
Yeah, we did one. I mean, it's not over. It's not an excessive.
Excessive,
amount of
right.
Okay.
values.
All right. Okay.
So you can propose some ideas and we'll look
Yeah.
at it. Director's report.
Well, it's going to be short and sweet. I started on August 3rd, so there's not that much I really need to report on for now. However, I'm really looking forward to working with the team, building up the new programs, and just really enjoying my time here for now. Right now, there's two things that I would really like to cover. Is the intern who was here for the summer, Abigail Silber. She was working with both the hospital and us. She did a great job in tracking some of our information. She got everything for the IA systems and the O&M systems put together into a database so that we'll be able to get them into the Barnstable County tracking system immediately. So we're really happy with the work she did there. And I do have some reports if anyone in the board would like to see it. But she also did a check on all the tick-borne diseases done in the town. And in the time that she was here, from May to August 5th of 2015, she was able to pull the information from MAVEN, the Massachusetts Virtual Epidemiologic Network, and compare that to the information of the suspect tick-borne diseases from the hospital. And there's a significant discrepancy. There, in MAVEN, there's 71 either suspect, probable, or confirmed cases of tick-borne diseases. However, in the hospital, they have 116 of suspect, probable, or confirmed cases. So part of the conversations that we were having is it's possible that some of the primary care physicians are recognizing the symptoms, the signs and the symptoms, and immediately prescribing the antibiotics that are necessary, and not necessarily putting the information in MAVEN. So that's a conversation that we would have to have with the hospital and the primary care physicians here, that these are all reportable diseases, and under the Mass General Law, they have to put it in and do the reporting, whether they like it or not, unfortunately. So I'll be working on that to be able to reach out, do this outreach campaign with our doctors, and get in contact with the community health and infectious disease groups in the hospital to make sure that this information is reported. We are hearing every once in a while, so-and-so has a staph infection. How many of you have heard this? Well, we won't even know that this person has staph or a suspected MRSA because it's not put in MAVEN. We would be the last to know, and we wouldn't be able to do any disease investigation with an underlying outbreak in the town. So that's just a conversation that I'll be having with the hospital and the local primary cares to make sure that information gets into MAVEN, so that that Art and I can get informed on this information. We get emails and we get calls from the epidemiologist's office at the state every time this gets put into MAVEN. So I have to express the importance to the primary cares that they need to do this, or else we won't be able to track and prevent the diseases.
How are you planning to do that?
Unfortunately, right now, it's one by one. I'm going to have to meet with them. Right, the first step that I'm going to do is meet with the infectious disease officer at the hospital, the college hospital, and see where we can work together, because he has a list of the primary care physicians that they work with, and I can go through him and we can work together with that office. Having to do all the legwork ourselves is really going to be gruesome and brutal. So we were going to work I'm trying to reach out to him so that we can work together and make sure that this is taken care of. Once again, I can't express the importance of what MAVEN is for anyone listening or reading the minutes.
It's certainly an area we need to improve.
Yes, we do.
It's sadly been a chronic problem.
So it's one of the things that sometimes, in my experience, when I was working with some of the hospital partners that I had, one of the for-profit hospitals that I dealt with once asked me, well, why should I? Well, the law says it, and your license is tied to it. So it's a very important part of the job, whether it takes 5 minutes when you see the patient themselves when you're writing up your case notes, or if you do it at the end of the day. It has to be done by law. So it is part of the work that I will be doing within the next few months.
At our September meeting, could we get her numbers for Lyme, babesiosis, and anaplasmosis?
I actually have Abigail's numbers.
Finished now?
Yes,
But there'll still be more this year.
Yes. So I actually went ahead and printed out some as of today for suspect and confirmed and probable babesiosis and Lyme up to date from January 1st to today. If you would like a copy of that, I have it here, and I have Abigail's report as well. So I can drop this off with you in just a minute. And I'm putting that aside for you so that I don't forget. So that would be part of the work that I'm doing within the next few months. And then one other thing that I would like to do is grow the community health side of the house. So I've been in communications with Rachel at Human Services and with town administration, and I would like to bring into you the information so that I can get moving on things such as the opioid and substance abuse issues, mental health, substance abuse issues on town. And then I'm also looking forward to actually starting to apply for some of the grants. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, it's actually a foundation created by the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. They are a major public health foundation in the country, and there is an open request for proposals right now for the culture of health. I can forward you each the information when I get back to the office tomorrow. It is a grant that I would like to pursue. I brought it to town administration today. She agrees that it's a good idea for us to start pursuing these sorts of grants. So I'm going to be forwarding this information to the board so for their review, and I'm going to be hopefully getting the application in. It's only due by November 12th. So we have a significant amount of time that we can write this grant. I'm looking forward to getting into that side of the house. The other foundations that I'm looking at is the De Beaumont Foundation. It is a family foundation, but these grants are significant in size, anywhere from $100,000 to into $500,000. And then there's the SAMHSA grant, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health. Forgot what the other S stands for. Administration. It's a federal office. There is a drug-free communities grant that opens up every year, and I would, with your permission, like to go after some of that money.
Go.
Okay.
Now, let's say you get one of those grants. Do those funds come directly to the town of Nantucket, or do they come to the Nantucket Health Department?
They come directly to the Nantucket Health Department.
Oh,
It's everything from these substance abuse grants, for example, the SAMHSA grant that I once worked on when I was the director in Everett. It was a 10-year grant, $1.2 million over those 10 years. It funded an entire a youth initiative, anti-substance abuse youth initiative. It funded a part-time employee to do this sort of work and to get the information out there, hold forums, get people into the group. I tend to stutter when I move quickly. It gets people into the coalitions and gets people into the services that are desperately needed for these people.
There's a lot going on in the island, so they'll all be coordinated.
All of it would be coordinated. It's the substance abuse grants from SAMHSA, the drug-free community specifically, requires a coalition. You need a hospital or a community health center, the town itself, a human services organization, and a nonprofit as part of the organization, the coalition. So I will be reaching out to the Vice President of Community Health at Partners Healthcare. He is a colleague of mine, Matthew Fishman. I will be reaching out to him to see what sorts of community health assets they can bring to the island.
Great.
Great.
Sounds good. I think it sounds good. This maven in tracking disease is, well, it's important.
Yes. Oh, and one last that I forgot to mention, the venison program.
Oh yes, how are we doing?
That's moving along really well. Would you like to give a quick report on that?
Yep.
No.
We have, with, I suppose, your approval, we have confirmed a processor. So
Good.
Very, very interested. So we're in the process. I did finally hear back from the food pantry. I'm going to try to sit down, I think, September 1st with them. And then the Hunt Club's the other piece of this. We've made contact with them, and we just need to get everybody in one room, do one quick little overview and hash out any issues. But at this point, it looks like it's going to happen.
We'll get it done. It sounds like great work.
So that's this year's hunting season. This year's hunting season?
I believe it's going to be in place for this year's hunting.
Oh, great.
Okay. Well, I know an organization would be happy to provide some funding if you're looking for it.
We actually had a meeting with our funders.
Oh, all right, this is a community association.
Oh, if
We'd be
you want to
happy
contribute, but
Yeah, we would.
You know, again, the processor needs to make money, and any offsetting of like purchasing of bags or
yeah.
invoices might be helpful.
An anonymous donor did have a meeting with Art and myself, so, and they will support it to some degree.
Okay.
But
Well, this is, I mean,
if you have additional
it's not
funds,
huge amounts of money, but it definitely is.
it would be quite helpful. Anything else?
That should be everything this time.
Comments from the board? Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And if I hear no objections, the meeting is adjourned.